Okay. So this is a make-up talk for the service that took place on May 15th. We had some audio difficulties that day. And this is my talk, which is entitled Spiritual Community Based on Being Kind and Not Horrible. I believe that it was the Dalai Lama who said, "My religion is simple. My religion is kindness." And it seems to me that that cuts through a lot of unnecessary stuff at the heart of religion and spirituality and what we're looking for in spiritual community and indeed in the world. There is no need for a code of canon law with hundreds of laws listed. There isn't any need for a book full of dogmas and doctrines that people will only disagree with anyway. My religion is kindness is both a mission statement and a vision statement, all in one. And it's something that we all get, isn't it? With no further need for elaboration. If our spiritual center and community had that as its byline, we could all remember it fairly easily, and we could get behind it very quickly. So it seems to me that right now in the world, kindness is in shortage, in short supply anymore, both in religious circles and in political circles. And it seems that something has been lost along the way recently, whether it's religion or politics. It seems more like a war footing, with the language of war being very prominent. The more militant foot soldiers of speaking of victory, of conquest, of winning souls, as if people are spiritual commodities in soul transactions. And that feels a long, long way from the community of love defined by people like Jesus and other founders of religious movements over the centuries. We in unity are culturally Christian, with founders who called themselves and prided themselves on the title Christian. We do utilize the Christian theology and we interpret the Bible. We use the Bible, though we interpret it very differently than many of the mainstream Christian churches. And we might do well to remember that the original Christians were the outcasts. They were kicked out of the Jewish community. They got kicked out for their newfound beliefs. They were considered radical and too different. And while initially the state, that is Rome, went after and persecuted the early Christian communities, it eventually co-opted them and imposed its order upon them. Christianity became the state religion with conformity and compliance standard. The legacy of that is still with us today. And we see it in a religion that seeks to impose its dogmas, its doctrines, its morality onto the whole population, with no regard for different faiths or creeds or for individual freedom of thought, or respect for the spirit that is said to be in all people. It seeks to hold power over people and others and to dominate them into submission. The community founded by Jesus never had such a name. That type of toxic religion needs to end, and it needs to be a thing of the past. It is not a religion based on kindness, but most often on horribleness and horrible behavior. The followers of Jesus never saw themselves as wielding power in that way of dominating a political structure or society or other people's lives so disrespectfully. World dominion was never the plan. Just transformation of people's lives through a caring spiritual community that helped them to get in touch with the spirit within. In a pluralistic society like ours, Religion or spirituality has to operate by attraction, not coercion, but persuasion. And that is where all of us come in. A former evangelical minister who I follow suggested that he wants to start a church called the Church of Not Being Horrible. Its mission statement would be, don't be horrible to people. It's what we believe doctrinal statements would be replaced by how we treat other promises. Sounds really appealing to me, and maybe to you also. I'd like to belong, for sure. And he says that the central question at any given moment is always the same question. Am I being horrible in my life to other people? And if you are, endeavor not to be. Change your way of thinking and your behavior. Adherence to that church or community would be open to other people helping them see their own blind spots for privilege, prejudice, ignorance, the stuff that tends to be at the core of horrible behavior. And the impetus is always to be decent, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be whatever it is that we believe that this moment, this place, this person is lacking. To be the kind of people like the world needs to make it a better place, to make one's religion or spirituality all about being kind. He further said that the Church of Not Being Horrible would gather every week to celebrate the inherent goodness of people, to share stories of the ways they have succeeded in being less horrible during the past week, and to challenge themselves to be even less horrible the next week. It may seem like a low bar to set, I know, but considering how the world has been recently, it's actually very aspirational, isn't it? I mean, if we could get the whole world to adopt this and to give up being horrible and try to be kind, that would achieve a lot. And I think he's on to something that we need to pay attention to, and something I think that any church or spiritual community that wants to succeed is going to have to take to heart. And in fact, it reminds me of unity and of our mission, but it's just more concise and precise. It is said that all loving spiritual communities are all recovery communities at heart, in some form or another. They are spaces where people acknowledge failures and admit flaws, work through issues and overcome fears and obstacles, and even places to grieve the sustained losses and setbacks that are part of our growth. They are places that allow you to admit and express your own doubts and fears, even places that allow you to fail and fall flat on your face, and yet give you a way to get back up, stand proud, and restore your sense of worth and dignity. Many religions and their houses of worship start out with a carefully calculated vision that is so sterile that it weeds out anyone or anything messy, imperfect, uncomfortable, or unwieldy. And yet, that is exactly where the divine is to be found, because it requires an expansive love that pushes beyond the nice, the neat, and the clean version of what we think spiritual community is all about, or what a spiritual human being looks like. So we need to get real. Let's get real, or there won't be any real people sitting in the pews or seats next to us. Just caricatures of what holy people look like. The divine lives and is found outside the lines of propriety, of perfection, and conformity. It is truly exhausting to feel that you have to constantly conceal the truest part of yourself when you are attempting to be the most authentic with a group of other people and with the divine itself. We shouldn't have to check ourselves at the door when we come to pray, to be inspired or form community. And that can lead to tension and conflict and a need for us to grow. One of the fallacies of good community, including spiritual community, is that its health is determined by their lack of conflict. Sometimes healthy community and community interaction creates unpleasant conversations and requires an ability to hold some tension while they're being resolved. And so discomfort isn't necessarily a sign of sickness. A lack of it can be, though, and in fact, it can be proof of a healthy diversity. We are all looking for the type of community that can accept who we are, just as we are, and yet a community that challenges us to also grow, to put one foot in front of another in the face of all of this anxiety, unprecedented change, fear, uncertainty, challenge, and bitter divides that we have been experiencing lately. Deep down inside, we want a society where we can have differences of opinion without the need to be vilified or ghosted by others just because we think differently. We want civility in our politics, social and religious gatherings, where our common decency is respected. And that's all at the heart of being kind. In many of the Bible stories, there's a theme of being found and included. That is what spiritual community needs to be for us, like the song Amazing Grace asserts. Many people have told us that when they come to unity, it feels like coming home. Maybe that was your experience too. And isn't that what we want for ourselves and for other people who show up here? We want a safe place where we can be ourselves, our true selves, our divine selves, that will be encouraged and nurtured. We want it to be a safe place for young, for old. And because of all we have been through in recent years, people are hungry for this type of redemptive community that makes the world a more compassionate, kind, decent, and loving place, no matter what the gathering place is called. But hopefully it is called church or spiritual community. Jesus set in motion a revolution of radical hospitality that stretched those who considered themselves religious and righteous. And his focus wasn't on some future reward, salvation, or a place of rest. Redemption and salvation was about the present moment of what he called the kingdom or the queendom of God, of heaven, to be found right here. He said that so many times. It is right here. He warned the so-called religious, righteous people of his time that the outcasts, the poor, the sinners, the homeless, the despised, the prostitutes, all were getting in ahead of them because they knew they were lost and they were open to being found. The truly lost are the ones who think they have it all figured out. They've religion all stitched up and they've it all figured out spiritually and are fully sure that they are better than the so-called lost. And there's a warning there for all of us to not fall into that trap. And it's so clear that the soul of religion is on the line as to whether it will evolve into this type of welcoming, inclusive community that we know it ought to be, a big tent with a huge table to which all are welcomed and invited. So the takeaway today is that we look at both religion and politics, and we see that being horrible, nasty, and vilifying seems to be trending right now. We need to be careful and avoid that trend. So what are we to do? It's up to us to double down on our efforts to be its opposite and to be kind whenever and wherever we can. Only kindness can drive out horribleness. Only inclusion can make up for exclusion. We are the ones the world is waiting for, to move the ball forward, to evolve this whole spiritual movement that has existed for thousands of years. So let us not grow faint, let us not give up, but be courageous and once again commit to being the kind people that the world needs. Okay, hopefully